Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is facing criticism from leaders at home and abroad over his push to annex Palestinian-held territory in the West Bank. Netanyahu had planned to do so on July 1st as he finally regained power after 2 years of election gridlock. The country's longest-serving prime minister made annexation a key part of his campaign in an effort to appease right-wing voters. However, he's also facing pushback from his coalition partner and election opponent, Benny Gantz. Gantz, a former military general and centrist lawmaker, has opposed unilateral annexation. He reportedly wants Israel to focus first on battling the COVID-19 pandemic. Foreign leaders are also denouncing the move. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson wrote a front-page op-ed in an Israeli newspaper saying that the move is contrary to Israel's own long-term interests and that the UK would not recognize such a move. For analysis, I want to bring in Newsday columnist Dan Raviv in Washington. He's also a former CBS News correspondent and author of several books on Israeli espionage and diplomacy. Hi, Dan. Does Netanyahu have the authority to unilaterally annex the West Bank? And how are the Palestinians responding right now?
Hey, Lana, interesting question. Within Israeli law, the Supreme Court of that country actually took up the issue and didn't reach a clear conclusion. But here's how it's going down in practice. In 1967, after the Six-Day War, when Israel captured the eastern part of Jerusalem from Jordan, just after that, Israel declared Jerusalem is united and will always be Israeli, and it was just a government declaration. However, when the Israelis decided to declare that the Golan Heights, captured from Syria, was part of Israel with Israeli law, they had the Knesset, the parliament, pass a law. That was in 1981. And in 2005, when the Israelis withdrew from the Gaza Strip and Hamas, that Palestinian faction, now rules Gaza, again, the Israelis actually did it through legislation, passing parliament. You know, what really counts this time, Lana, is that Prime Minister Netanyahu just decides to declare that Israel is annexing parts of the West Bank. The Israeli legal situation might be unclear, but we do know that most countries in the world would consider that a violation of international law, acquiring territory by force. Israel disagrees, but most of the world feels that way, Lana.
Yeah, it's interesting, Dan, that Netanyahu is doing this right now, especially having just come off of this bruising election that lasted so many cycles. And he has seen his popularity among Israeli voters slip and his ability to build a coalition being called into question. Is that the reason why this is happening right now, contrary to the public opinion of world leaders?
As usual with that small country, Israel, there's so much going on at once, but COVID-19 is actually the center of what the government is doing. Netanyahu did form a coalition with his rival Benny Gantz joining. Benny Gantz is the defense minister. Gantz has said he's not necessarily against annexing parts of the West Bank, but there has to be an agreement with the Palestinians, with the U.S. government totally endorsing it. Netanyahu thought he had a green light from President Donald Trump. They consider themselves friends, Trump and Netanyahu, and the Trump peace plan did say that Israel could annex territories in the West Bank, but as part of peace negotiations and an agreement. There's no sign of peace negotiations, so this would be Israel acting on its own, but they couldn't get it together. The Israeli government didn't reach agreement by July 1st, and the signals from the White House are mixed. It's almost a red light right now from the Trump administration.
That's very interesting, Dan, and I think you've hit on a really smart point here for our viewers. The Trump relationship with Netanyahu, Bibi, as he likes to call him, is so strong that President Trump even appeared in re-election campaign materials for Netanyahu. So the fact that the White House really has been mum on this subject, is that a warning to Netanyahu? And is he at all possibly going to pull back on this if there's international pressure to do so?
Well, it didn't happen this week on July 1st. I don't think it's going to happen next week. And Israeli politicians are saying it could take weeks or months. They have to figure out the maps. What they have in mind now is areas where only Jewish settlers live, very close to Jerusalem. Yes, on captured territory, disputed territory. But the Israelis claim that the land they have in mind, no Arabs live there. This won't hurt any Palestinians. Of course, a lot of disagreements on that. that. President Trump, of course, has other issues, including the election here. And Trump has found that being pro-Israel helps Trump with Christian evangelical voters, with some Jewish voters. But right now, Trump doesn't seem to feel he needs another controversy. And his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who wrote the Trump peace plan for Israelis and Palestinians, which seems to be going nowhere, Kushner apparently has told his father-in-law, let's not stir up more trouble. The Arab countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates don't want Israel to do this. It'll be an insult to the Palestinians. Let's not do it. The U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, a former Trump lawyer, he is encouraging the Israelis to do it. Israeli right-wingers, nationalists, including settlers, they feel that Trump may lose the election in November, and so they will have lost their chance. Joe Biden is definitely against annexation.
Well, Dan, can you talk to our viewers a little bit more about this, what would be a bizarre power-sharing agreement in the United States? I couldn't imagine coming out of the November election and having President Trump and Joe Biden working together as a sort of joint prime ministers, as Gantz and Netanyahu are jointly working together with the Israeli government. So how significant is Gantz's opposition to Netanyahu's push for annexation? And could it mean that there will be another election, the fourth election in 2 years?
It's quite amazing. Israeli politics, very volatile. No Israeli voters wanted to see yet another election. So that's why the two rivals decided to get together. Netanyahu continues as prime minister. He hopes that that will give him immunity to stay out of prison because, you know, this month, the trial of Benjamin Netanyahu on fraud and bribery charges will start in earnest. Gantz is on standby. He is scheduled to become the prime minister in a couple of years. So it is power sharing. It's something you'd never see with Trump and Clinton or Trump and Biden, but it's a parliamentary system over there. And so whoever is prime minister has to control a majority in the parliament, the Knesset. This was the only way that Netanyahu could stay in office, but it's limited him, and we're seeing it right now. He can't annex parts of the West Bank, not right now.
And Dan, you heard in my introduction Boris Johnson's op-ed. Tell our viewers more about why foreign leaders have been so opposed to Netanyahu's actions.
Yeah, and the British Prime Minister is an example of someone who's known as a friend of Israel. So he was giving advice as a friend, don't do this. It will be seen worldwide as unfair to Palestinians, denying their rights. And many foreign leaders are telling the Israelis that it will be seen as a form of apartheid, hearkening back to South Africa when it was ruled by the white minority. Because if you consider the West Bank, where most of the people are Palestinian Arabs, could it be that only the Jewish citizens in the settlements have full rights, but the Palestinian Arabs don't? Israeli right-wingers say, hey, that's the Palestinians' fault. They should enter negotiations and they could have their own country eventually. But the Palestinians say no under very unfair conditions. So the world is dead set against Israel changing things unilaterally. A lot of people in the world don't like the current situation. They say it's Palestinians living under occupation. But what Israel has been considering, annexation, keeping some of the land forever, world public opinion, except for maybe parts of the Trump administration, is dead set against it.
All right, Dan Raviv, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay.